This is Johnny with TigerBomb MMA, and today I'm going over UFC Seattle, Cejudo versus Song. Give you my thoughts and predictions on the entire 11-bout card. So 11 bouts full of analysis that I'll give you on this, I'm being honest, kind of uneventful card itself. There's a lot of, I don't want to call them bums, but people who may or may not belong in the UFC or may never even get a UFC win, and we'll get to that once we get to that. But we've got the return of Henry Cejudo. And right off the bat, like one of my favorite competitors, fighters of all time. Primarily the word competitor I'll be using a lot when I'm breaking him down. And Song gets to get back on track after a loss to Peter Yan when he was looking pretty good, kind of trying to ride a two-fight winning streak against some top competition. But yeah, does Cejudo still have it? That's what we're going to find out. But yeah, 11 bouts here in the Seattle card. If you haven't noticed, I'm wearing a Supersonics hat because I'm trying to chill out. But yeah, let's get started with the first fight of the night. Here we've got Modestas Bukauskas at 205 versus Rafael Cerqueira. Minus 325 for Bukauskas, come back on Rafael Cerqueira. Plus 260. Automatically, I don't like these odds at all. I don't think Modestas Bukauskas, I don't care how bad Rafael here looked against Ibo Aslan in his debut. Mind you, he was a favorite in that fight, and Ibo was like a slight dog. And when I looked at this guy, I'm having trouble with his name here, Cerqueira. This dude was an absolute bum beater. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. There's things about him that are, you cannot take away. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, trains with good guy like Jailton Almeida, and he's a bum beater. All that is true. And I don't think we got to see truly what he can do in the UFC. And they're giving him a guy that isn't going to hit him once and severely hurt him. But my questions about Cerqueira here is he a quitter? He looked like he quit in his fight against Ibo Aslan. It did not look good. It only lasted 15 seconds or something. It was awful. It was an awful performance. But the thing about those types of fighters is they're beating the shit out of everybody in the regional scene. Right, they're beating everyone up. His shit doesn't stink. This guy can come in here and just maybe beat everybody. We saw what Ibo can do, and we'll talk about Ibo a bit later, but it didn't seem as if he took it seriously. And against Bukauskas, a guy who, he has no business being minus 3 anything against anybody. This guy got severely hurt, lost a round, and optically was losing to a guy that he just recently beat, and Prachnio, to who me is the weakest light heavyweight. Possibly it might be Rafael here, but we won't know until the fight happens. So automatically I'm looking at the plus 260 as let's take a shot on him, because I'm assuming this guy's going to take a different approach against Bukauskas. I don't think he's going to play around. I think he's going to actually mix in some takedowns immediately, because his striking wasn't too bad. But again, when you're beating the shit out of everybody in the regional scene, you're going to feel like you're invincible, and the guy got hit once and he's like, oh shit, I'm maybe not ready. So I'd like to give him a second chance, because again, Bukauskas, these odds indicate he's going to come out here and steamroll this dude, and I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be competitive. Maybe he does get steamrolled. I have no idea, because again, this is a different level of guy, right? This is a different level. This is a UFC. Bukauskas has been proven, and he's a solid striker. He can grapple, but he's not the best grappler. His style has definitely evolved ever since he got cut, and obviously Khalil Roundtree exploded his kneecap, which to me, that was still absolutely vicious. But he's more of a tank type of striker. He's still got some good hands, he's got some good power, but he's not really known as a big knockout kind of guy. So I do think that Rafael, if he stays very patient on the outside, he has pretty good kicks from the outside. He has a really good lead, or not a lead. I think he's got a rear back kick that's not too bad. Yeah, nasty rear body kick I have here. Just kind of keep him on the outside, keep him at distance, mix in some takedowns, see what you can do with your black belt. I don't like it. I really don't. It's really kind of a fade on Bukauskas at these odds. Maybe it's not the smartest thing for me to say. Also, I don't really give a shit about my record about predicting. I'm just stating that Bukauskas is not the guy to be betting at minus 325. Yes, I know that Rafael looked really bad in his debut, but I'm cutting him a little bit of slack here, because again, he came in there more than likely a little too overconfident, thinking he was the shit. So I'm expecting him to look better. Give me Cerqueira to win this one by a decision. I'm not confident in him at all because we haven't seen what he can do against top competition. But realistically, I don't really see Bukauskas as being like a huge threat to him. That being said, watch him knock him out in the first round. But moving on, we've got Nick Klein versus Mansour Abdul Malik. Malik minus, that's not real, minus 560. It's not. It's like minus 900 by now. He's 7-0. Come back on Nick Klein, who's 6-1 plus 410. Now, I don't want to spend all day on this, but what are the chances that Nick Klein can win this fight? Being that Mansour already beat his more or less counterpart in Wes Schultz, a guy that has, well, Wes Schultz has better wrestling, but a guy who has wrestling, who has the ability to kind of tough it out. Nick Klein's a tough dude. He's just not skilled enough to beat a guy like Malik, a guy who's that athletic, that pedigree in wrestling, Division I wrestler, a guy who hits that hard, a guy who has better striking. He's just a threat looking at him, right? I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Klein like tries giving him his wallet midway through. So Malik, he's running through a lot of his competition early, just knocking him out. He's already fought much better competition than Nick Klein. And on top of that, he's very live for a first-round knockout because he just tends to do that. He just kind of goes buck wild, which is a good thing and a bad thing. If he gets it done in the first round, perfect, no sweat. You got your money inside the distance, no problem. But if Nick Klein can survive, and this means that Nick Klein has to get 10-7'd in the first round for him to survive and still have enough left in the tank to beat a Division I former wrestler, a guy who is that powerful, better striking. Nick Klein, he had a very impressive Dana White Contender Series bout where he got that dude who used to be a welterweight in Geraldo Souza in that rear naked choke. And if you look at his tape, I don't blame the kid for giving up his back because he did not look like a threat. Nick Klein, I believe he's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, maybe brown belt. Let me see here. Brown belt in jiu-jitsu, right? He's got the submission game. He's got a good submission game. Very nice rear naked choke. But if you look at the tape, this kid in Souza, was his name right? Souza? Did not view him as a threat, and that paid severely. And had it not been for that kid making that mistake, this Nick Klein would not be in the UFC. His tape was not good. He relies heavily on getting takedowns. His striking's not clean. He can definitely take an ass whooping, but like the only guy like that really gave him a challenge was his first actual defeat. Let me go back and look. And that was not a pretty fight. This guy, Dorjan Dokaj. There you go. He got pounded out in the third round. Nick Klein, I don't think, provides anything for Mansour that he hasn't seen already. He's not going to be able to wrestle him down. He's not going to be able to outstrike him. He's not going to be able to outpower him. It truly does rely on Malik to get tired and Malik beating Malik that way, which is a possibility, right? It's unlikely that he's going to survive the first round. If Malik wants to, say, for example, test his cardio, he's going to beat his ass for 3 rounds, 5, as many rounds as he wants, really. Like, who's going to stop Malik? Give me Malik round number 1. I've already actually parlayed him with someone else on this one. But yeah, it sucks for Nick Klein to be given Malik. It's almost like, hey, you beat a guy that we wanted in the UFC and Souza. Your punishment is getting an ass whooping. Next bout, we've got Ricky Simon versus Javid Basharat. Instantly, I know I'm not the only one saying this, but these odds on Ricky Simon are disrespectful. And I'm here for it, though, and I'll explain to you why. But it's plus 230 for Ricky Simon. Come back on Basharat is minus 285. Let me take a sip. All right, Basharat. I've got a lot to say about him. Both these guys have qualities that I absolutely fucking hate. Basharat, in particular, his last fight, which was a year ago against Ayman Zahabi. I went back and rewatched it live. I bet Zahabi because there's something that happens midway through a fight, specifically when you got a specific type of character like in Basharat and his style, that he doesn't put a stamp on rounds. He doesn't do enough to particularly solidify that he is dominated a round for something to occur, say a knockdown or just an oddity, not to be able to necessarily steal the round back to the opponent. And that's kind of what happened here with Zahabi. Javid is I've been calling him male Chukagian. He is a point fighter. He doesn't necessarily hit hard enough. He throws a lot of volume. He has a nice pace. He can wrestle. He can do a lot of these things, but he's not a dominant type of fighter where he's going to hit you so hard that it's going to, get echoed in the apex or in the arena. He's not going to cause too much damage. He's kind of a pillow-fisted guy, but he has very good output. And when you look at his opponents, every single one of his opponents is no longer in the UFC. And I'll list them off. Fuck it, I got time. We have here Mateus Mendonça, never won a UFC bout, I don't believe. Tony Gravely, no longer in the UFC. Trevin Jones, no longer in the UFC. That guy was a fucking gun-shy douchebag. Victor Henry was a no contest because he kicked him in the balls, and Karma caught up to him, and Zahabi beat him in that fight. So if I'm being honest, in that second round, he did enough to win the fight via volume, but he was showing some terrible optics where he was spamming terrible takedowns. And at the end of the round, like maybe the last minute or so, Zahabi was landing some pretty hard shots on him that were more impressive than his volume. And there was a moment there where he looked fatigued, even possibly hurt by maybe a shot that did or didn't land by Zahabi. And at the end of the round, Zahabi hits him with a punch, and he seemingly kind of trips on his ankle, and it looked like he got knocked down, and that visual was enough to steal the round for Zahabi. Whether it's correct or it's not, I'm not here to argue that. I'm just telling you what the visuals were, and what that leads me to believe is that Javid is not the kind of guy that you want to take at minus 300, 400 odds against anybody when he isn't solidifying rounds. Like, he needs to have extreme output and nothing touching him, but this guy is like a toothpick with a meatball for a head. This guy leaves his head up in the air. He's very thin. His head is a huge target. And for Ricky, what pisses me off about Ricky is that he is much better than these odds indicate. Like, he's fought the better competition. He's got the Division I wrestling background. He can get submissions. He's super strong. He actually is going to be the harder hitter here. He's got an inch in reach over Javid. And he can just walk Javid down and impose his will on him. Even if he doesn't land on the head, he can still hit harder, either to the body or low kicks or whatever, to solidify the rounds. But with Ricky, he's a mental midget. If he isn't having success anywhere, he stops fighting. He just stands on the outside. He'll maybe try to throw an overhand, maybe try to throw a low kick, and then try to engage in the wrestling. And Javid's got some decent takedown defense, so I can see Javid keeping it on the feet. But then what is Ricky going to do? Is he going to push a pace on him, try to knock him out? He should, and I think he can have success, but he's not trustworthy, right? It is a dog or pass, but when you are taking the dog in Ricky Simón, you have to realize that he can absolutely let you down. And he is, imagine Calvin Kattar in the first 2 rounds against Zalal. Like, dude, do something. You're just getting picked apart. It's not necessarily hurting you too bad. Just do something. That's the kind of fighter Ricky can be. But in this case, I don't see Javid having much power to keep him at bay, but I do see him having the output to maybe confuse Ricky and him kind of getting in his own head. So I hate this matchup to pick, because I've picked Ricky to beat a guy in his last bout against Vinicius Oliveira, and he looked very capable of doing so if he just threw more output, but he refused to, and Oliveira just kind of coasted. But Oliveira does hit harder. I'm picking Basharat by decision because I do believe he has that kind of style that Ricky can kind of just be a little too tentative. But my God, it is a dog or pass. So I'm more than likely I'm going to put a few bucks on Ricky Simón because he's got the potential to win. And at these odds, it's kind of hard not to say no, but I don't trust Ricky to pick him to win. So I don't want to spend too much time on this one. I hate this fight, but hopefully we see some improvements from Basharat where he's kind of laying on his punches instead of focusing on that, on the volume. The volume is his game. It's solid. Like, he's got good cardio, but he's kind of a harmless dude once you get to the higher level. So at this case, he is at a higher level, but Ricky's kind of mentally broken sometimes. The next bout, we've got Nurulstan Ruziboev versus Eric McConico. It is black on black crime that's going to happen here. We've got black Ruziboev minus 300 come back on black McConico plus 240. I'm going to just outright and say it. I'm looking at McConico. He trains at the lab. He cornered Jared Cannonier just this last weekend. And I don't know if they're doing Cannonier and the lab a favor for Eric to come into the UFC, but this guy has not been impressive. Now, what I can say about him is what I say about a lot of guys in the UFC that don't necessarily belong is that they are solid everywhere. He has decent power. He's got good boxing, uh, pretty good, I believe, also a rear back kick that he uses very well. I believe, if I wrote it down correctly, yeah, he has a really nice high kick that he throws often. It's a rear high kick that I kind of like. It's probably his best weapon. But what I don't like about this guy is that on multiple occasions, I've seen him do a chicken dance. He's getting rocked, he's getting hurt by very low competition, and I'm just not here for it. I know Ruziboev, you could look at him and say this guy sucks, and this is at middleweight. I don't know how he's making 170 against Buckley, but the fact that he did it was impressive alone, but he looked off. At this weight, he's going to be the more dynamic striker. And essentially about Ruziboev, do I want to pick him and maybe put him on a parlay? No. Do I trust him to come out here and not be a moron? No. But what I do trust in him is that he will go out there and try to finish a fight, whether it's on his back or on the feet with strikes. Because the guy is a finisher. He's kind of an idiot. Like I think skill for skill against anybody, this guy's not the highest skilled, but he has a high potential for a finish, whether it be like a surprise armbar or a triangle or a flying knee or a 1-2. This guy can definitely finish a lot of people, but when it comes to the higher echelon of durable guys with better wrestling and striking, this guy's not at the top of the list. McConico, he's not going to be the more athletic guy here. The only path to victory is if Ruziboev is just so unable to do anything off of the mat. McConico is going to have to wrestle here. And even there, I still see Ruziboev having some success. But I do think that Ruziboev will actually land something right down the middle, like a 1-2, maybe a high knee that's going to hurt McConico, and he's going to get pounded out in the first round. Again, man, I don't know how this dude's in the UFC, but yeah, props to him and his team. Moving on, we have got Ian Cutelaba versus Ibo Aslan. The tape here is so misleading because the tape tells me that Cutelaba is going to win this one at a plus 115. That's very nice. But the thing about tape is that it always lies when it's talking about Ian Cutelaba. This guy looked very good in his last fight against even Erslan, but with context, it looked like Erslan was hurt going into that fight, or maybe during the fight. And on top of that, it almost seemed like even Erslan was just terrified to be in the UFC. Such an odd performance because I actually picked him to win. I put some money on him at dog odds, and he didn't look good. He didn't look like what tape said. And when you look at Cutelaba, the guy's supposed to be a gasser. This dude's supposed to kind of be a moron, and he's out here fighting with a jab. This dude's like super confident on the feet, not getting rocked. The dude is super unreliable, but I saw some progression in him. But I feel as if that progression can definitely like lead you down a path where you're betting Cutelaba and this dude's gonna get knocked out or he's gonna do something stupid. And the other thing I thought, like the recent Captain America movie came out with a Red Hulk. I'm curious if he's gonna come out to the weigh-ins all painted red. That'd be cool. So he's gonna want to win this fight. Come on, against Ibo Aslan. He is 14-1. He avenged his only loss to Turkali, where he knocked him out. But even in that fight, this guy is winging wide. He is not the cleanest striker, but he does have the ability to land, and that's what scares me in this bout because this dude in the pocket, he will maraud you. He'll come forward. He's not the cleaner guy. He's not going to have the better wrestling, but he's a big dude, 6'3", 77.5-inch reach. So what worries me about Cutelaba, who on paper should be the better fighter with the Sambo wrestling background, is that I think he's even contemplating moving down to middleweight because he's going to look small here against a guy who looks more like the Hulk than he does. It just comes down to who wants it more, and I've seen Cutelaba break on multiple occasions. So to me, it's such a difficult one to pick because Aslan on paper looks absolute trash. I picked Turkali to beat his ass, and funny enough, the judges gave him both rounds. So whatever he's doing, good or bad, it's appealing to the judges. And I don't know, man. I'd rather stay away from it. I'm going to pick Aslan primarily as a Cutelaba fade, because anytime Cutelaba gets any momentum, he kind of goes back and reverts back to his idiot self. So if this becomes like a tit for tat kind of striking battle, I would have more faith in Ebo to hit harder and maybe have the better chin at this point. Cutelaba's been finished multiple occasions, and Ebo, despite his lack of head movement, his horrible striking, he seems to have decent enough, cardio, decent enough power to really do some damage here. So I'm going to go with Ebo to actually get a knockout in the later rounds, like maybe round number 2 or 3. I think it's going to go over 1.5 because of the threat of the knockout, unless Cutelaba just goes bananas. You know how he goes. So give me, say, round number 2, maybe round number 3 for Ebo Aslan. Next bout, we've got Andre Fili versus Costa. -110, -110. Dead. Pick them on both. So Costa, solid striker, like good footwork. His jiu-jitsu game has definitely improved, and he's seemingly wanting to highlight that in his last fight and his win in the UFC against Nurdenbeka. He was giving up takedowns a little too easily, and he was demonstrating some good heart and some good cardio where he was kind of wearing him down, preventing any real damage. And then finally in the third round, he sunk in the rear naked choke, got the tap. So I was impressed by Costa. But when it comes to Andre Fili, typically when he's fighting lesser competition, he tends to go through them no problem. But Fili is another guy that you can't always trust. He's very hot and cold. And with Fili, you look at his last few fights, man, like he gets a nasty knockout over Almeida, which, he felt as if he was being disrespected. He saw the openings for Almeida and he knocked him out. Gets knocked out by Dan Ige, but, you can't really fault him at that. Against Cub Swanson, some people might try to disregard that, like, oh my God, like Fili's falling off. Cub's a tough fight, and we just saw that Cub, he may retire on that win over Billy Q, but he knocked the fuck out of Billy Q. So Cub still has it in him. He's still a very dangerous guy. When it comes to Costa, I don't really view him that dangerous. I don't think he's going to have that kind of power to really threaten Fili. I think Fili's imposing. He's going to be the bigger guy slightly, longer reach, probably the better striker, hits harder. He's got the wrestling advantage. He's going to be able to get Costa down. It's just, will Fili do something to fuck it up for everybody? So at these odds, I'd rather stay on Fili, who I think is the better, more proven fighter. To me, Fili's always been the kind of guy that he can beat probably anyone in his division if just given certain circumstances. And I'll explain, like, if you go in to his record, and I'm not trying to justify him, for his losses or anything like that, but you look at his record, let's just say Sadiq Yusuf, not even that, Michael Johnson. A lot of people thought he beat Michael Johnson, but it was a split. It went in the favor of Johnson. Sadiq Yusuf, very close fight. Little tweaks here and there. He could have won that fight. He competes with these guys. Charles Jourdain, he beats him. Bryce Mitchell competes with Bryce Mitchell. Looking good. I think of 29-28. Joe Anderson Brito, let's not talk about that one. Bill Algeo, funny enough, not the best look. It's almost like he competes to the level of his competition, so it does scare me. Nathaniel Wood, again, very close back and forth fight. He ends up losing that. Dan Ige knocks him out, gets knocked out by him. And he's been fighting top-level dudes, and I think he can beat a lot of the guys I just listed that beat him, just given certain tweaks. But for Costa, one of the lesser dangerous dudes, not necessarily the best jiu-jitsu guy. He's not really going to threaten Fili anywhere. But again, it's not like Fili can't get caught. Like, he's been caught before. You catch him slipping sometimes, but give me Fili by a decision here. I think he keeps him at bay. He did just recently come out and say that he's having a kid. I'm expecting him to be fighting a little bit smarter, a little bit cleaner, and I think he's going to want to prove a point here. I think he's going to beat the shit out of Costa. Costa's probably going to try to grapple at some point, probably survive. Give me Fili by decision. Next bout, we've got Alonzo Menifield versus newcomer Julius Walker. Julius is 6-4. He's plus 140. Menifield minus 170. And I hate to say this, so it pains me because I hate Alonzo Menifield. He is one of these guys that I try to fade every single time because the guy is just so unimpressive. the way he fights because he doesn't do too much with higher level competition. Like you give him a bum, he'll run right through him, knock him the fuck out. It's just when you give him dudes that are the better striker, he struggles and then he seems to get lucky. Like for example, against Dustin Jacoby, he's getting his ass beat the whole fight. Dustin gets dropped. He ends up winning the fight by I guess 2 knockdowns in round number 2, number 3. Shit like that. Like he's unreliable. And when you are relying on that knockout or that knockdown, it can be a problem. And then as of late, he's been getting knocked the fuck out, which has been like perfect. I faded him to the point where it started becoming profitable because I was losing money like on Jacoby fucked me over, right? Olberg makes me bank, and then Mirzakhanov makes me bank with a knockout. It's just been fantastic. So I look to fade Menifield whenever I can, but against Julius Walker, it's going to be really hard for Julius to not get knocked out here. Julius, he's a big dude, 6'4". He's got a tremendous reach over Menifield, but I just think a 6-0 guy, this is just way too much, way too soon. And here's the thing, I do think that Walker can win this fight. You know, he has good attributes. He actually has some decent jiu-jitsu, I believe a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and he likes to use it. He primarily likes to get into the grappling, but Alonzo he's fought better competition. He's been in there with harder hitters. He's been in there with just an array of different fighters. And the tape on Walker is that the dude is getting nearly out-grappled by guys that can't even sniff the UFC. There's a dude, Niall Bartling, who was essentially dominating him in the mat. And eventually he got the top position, got on top and choked him out. So the visuals aren't there for me for this guy. There's a chance he can win if he stays measured on the outside, doesn't try to, initiate the grappling. But if Menifield initiates the grappling, I think he'd have success there. He doesn't necessarily hit too hard. All of his finishes tend to come from the ground where he's just a big dude knocking out guys. But his last fight against this Myron Dennis, he's a vet. He's been everywhere. He's 20-2. This guy is fighting like the Bevon Lewises of the world, who the dude got ruined by Uriah Hall. This guy's beating Uriah Hall. He's looking like a future prospect. Then he gets knocked out. And then ever since then, his confidence, he's just never been the same after that. These aren't the types of guys I look to see, and he's not showing me the kind of style that's going to tell me that he's going to beat Alonzo Menifield. And Alonzo at these odds, yeah, he's been knocked out a few times, but those are 2 elite strikers, and Walker is not an elite striker. The guy can strike. He can probably have some success, but eventually if Menifield hits him, it's going to be like Walker's never been hit before. So give me Menifield to win this one in the first 2 rounds by... Shit, I can even see him getting a submission, right? His submission skills have improved where he can submit guys like Jimmy Crute. If Julius throws, actually, I'm gonna go bold and say that by submission. If Walker shoots in with a stupid takedown, leaves his neck exposed, I can see Menifield snatching that up. He's just way too strong. I will say round number 2. But yeah, man, I wanted to pick Walker, but I was just not impressed by the tape. And trust me when I say I really wanted to pick Walker. Next bout, John Silva, Melsik Baghdarsaryan, -575 for John Silva. Come back on Baghdarsaryan is +145. Initially, I did look to try to parlay John Silva, but I came down to it. I'm like, you know what? It's going to be an interesting bout. At this point, I think it's like not a dog or pass. I'm not saying that. It's like maybe try to find a different path for Silva instead of just taking the money line. I think it's too much, right? I think John is more than capable of looking every bit of -575, but at this point he's priced out. You can't really take that. Either maybe, TKO, submission. There's an array of things you can look at. I'm kind of looking at maybe the over on the takedowns for John Silva. I don't know what they're going to be, but I do expect him to actually land a takedown. Now, looking at his let me see. Looking at his stats, has he ever shot for a takedown in the UFC? It says he's got 50% accuracy, but I don't recall him ever really shooting for a takedown. But against Baghdarsaryan, here's the thing about John Silva. Well, actually, let me talk about Baghdarsaryan and before I get into it. But Baghdarsaryan, he's looking in tremendous shape, right? His last fight, how long ago was that? That was a year, almost 2 years ago. against Tucker Lutz, as I call him, Fucker Butts, no longer in the UFC. He's another guy who has beaten dudes that are no longer in the UFC. So Fucker Butts over here, no longer in the UFC. Horrible performance from both men. They should have cut him midway through, Tucker, that is, because that was awful. Bruno Souza. Funny story about Bruno Souza. I actually went to the Machida gym and he was teaching a class. Nice guy, but not in the UFC. Colin Anglin. There's a lot of shit about Colin Anglin that if you can't finish Colin Anglin, you don't belong in the UFC. And Melsik beat him, but also not in the UFC. And most recent, or not most recently, his best win is Dennis Bazooka, for fuck's sake, you know? So Melsik, he's an impressive kickboxer, right? Tremendous kicks. He hits hard. The dude is very lacking in the ground game. If Tucker Lutz can keep you down, and that guy sucks, then John Silva, even not trying, can get you down. And that's the thing. John Silva, you might view him as a striker, just purely a striker, and he's fantastic. Like, everything that he does is like, this guy's fucking ridiculous. I've been seeing on Twitter people posting him fucking Spider-Manning off the cage and just like screaming and shit. I'm like, this guy's insane. This dude, as I call the fighting nerds, they are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Nerdles. This dude is fucking Raphael. He's just unstable. This guy's angry. Dude is like bipolar. He's fucking crying midway through the fight or before the fight, like he's getting announced. He beats the shit out of Drew Dober. He starts crying and thanking him and saying, I love you. But you just beat the shit out of the man. You fucked him up so bad. John Silva's a delight to watch, but the dude isn't just a striker. This guy is a I'm here to kill you kind of fighter. And if that means getting a takedown, which I do expect him to do, I expect him to shoot on Melsik, not as a, oh my God, I fear for my life because I need to get you down because you're a better striker, but in the, my job is to kill you, do it quick, and I think he's going to do that here to Melsik. On the feet, he's going to provide a ton of pressure to Melsik. He's going to crowd him. Anytime he throws a kick, he will find something for him. This guy is just too good at this very moment. And the confidence. And when he starts feeling, as I call it, the death shuffle, where he's just kind of moving around, like that is danger right there. And it's not to say that Melsik can't maybe land something that can hurt John Silva. He's not invincible. It's just skill for skill. John Silva, with the guidance of the nerds, he's going to shoot for a takedown and beat the shit out of Melsik. That's why I'm like, I'm not feeling the money line. Typically, when I look at this, like, I'd rather not even risk putting the negative bullshit on John Silva to have him lose with me on a parlay with him. So I'm looking at the over 1.5 or possibly the over 1.5 that, or just over 0.5 with takedowns. I expect him to actually land some takedowns on Melsik, and hopefully the line is good. But give me John Silva to TKO him in like the first 2 rounds. It's going to be a fun fight. This is probably my main event, but I digress. Let's move on here. Catchweight bout. We've got Rob Font versus John Matsumoto. -175 from Matsumoto. Come back on Font +130. Rob Font is making the comeback of the century, says no one ever, because that Kyler Phillips fight has a lot of context to it that I need to get to, but Kyler was a huge favorite against Rob Font for good reason. Rob Font was getting dominated on the mat. Rob Font was getting chinned by a ton of people. Rob Font was just showing his age. He's 37 years old, and he beats Kyler Phillips. Matsumoto, on the other hand, he's 25 years old. He's on a good prime run. He is a little green, if you will. He's 16-0. Some might say that that's not green at all. That he's a bright prospect for sure, but he has some qualities that need to be tightened up. But from what I've seen from this Matsumoto kid is that he is the real deal. And given just more seasoning, more time, this guy could make a top 15 run, because this guy's fighting the number 11 in the world in bantamweight. And that shows how much the UFC has faith in him for him to be taking the spot. It was supposed to be Dominic Cruz, right? He gets injured, he's retired. But for John Matsumoto to be given this opportunity, either he's got some brass balls on him, or the UFC actually thinks highly of him, that they will allow him to get in the cage against Rob Font, because they don't want to ruin a 16-0 prospect and giving him a guy that they think can beat him. what I like about John is that he's nasty everywhere. He's got nasty boxing. Maybe not the cleanest. He's not going to be the better boxer between him and Rob Font, but he's got good counters, nasty low kicks. He's got black belts in both Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's got a nasty guillotine. And what I was really impressed was two fights in the UFC against Dan Argueta. I picked against John Matsumoto for the reasons being that it's a Dana White Contender Series guy, and when it's Dan Argueta, whose only objective is to hold you down, that could be enough for, a young guy who's not prepared to lose. And it was looking that way until John made some adjustments. He ended up, making Argueta shoot for his life and caught him in a nasty guillotine, like disgustingly tight. Against Brad Katona, a tough veteran in Brad Katona. Brad was looking pretty good early. He hurts him with an elbow, but the adjustments that John Matsumoto was making with the countering in that fight were amazing. Like the way he was tagging Brad, like Brad's got an epic chin. He's got a psychopath kind of chin. And the way he was landing on him was impressive as fuck. His cardio looked good. His attempts for takedowns looked good. It was a very good performance from Matsumoto that shows me that this guy's got a ton of potential. And for Rob Font, as I was explaining that context, Kyler Phillips, he's absolutely talented. It's a great win for Rob Font. But to be honest, and this is going to come back and bite me because there's going to be a fight where Kyler Phillips is just going to be able to dominate a guy. But if I'm going to be honest about Kyler, he is a very talented bitch. He bitched out in that fight horribly against Rob Font. And that's one of the first time I believe that he went up to Canada and trained with Firas Zahabi, didn't work out well for his buddy in Calvin Kattar, because of course it wouldn't. But for Rob Font, he's a different kind of animal, right? He's got very offensive-minded boxing, moves forward. And for Kyler Phillips, the problem is he only has limited cardio because he moves around a lot. He gassed himself out trying to hold down Rob Font. And I was telling people, like, dude, like, Firas Zahabi probably just told Rob Font, don't change anything. Just wiggle around on the ground. Try to avoid getting subbed. You already do that well. You're going to tire out Kyler and then just pressure him. And he's going to break. Nothing really changed from Rob Font other than, not giving up those takedowns, being able to get back up. But that was more on Kyler Phillips getting tired. And the thing with Kyler is that he doesn't have... And it pisses me off not being able to realize that at the time, because I thought Kyler was going to be able to just grapple fuck Rob. It should have been, but dude gassed himself out. It's ridiculous. But he hasn't got the power to really deter Rob Font from moving forward and just throwing whatever the fuck he wanted. He could only really hurt Rob Font with a kick, and with him getting crowded, he wasn't going to land that anytime soon. John isn't that kind of guy. If you bum rush John, he will counter you and he will hurt you. We've seen Rob get hurt plenty of times where he's tripling up, quadrupling up on strikes, but he gets hit so fucking hard that his brain shuts off for a moment and he starts stumbling and he just looks awful and he loses the round. He loses the fight. He's a tough dude, but against Matsumoto, he's not going to just run around and get tired. He's going to fight back. And at a certain point, with Matsumoto's low kicks adding up on the lead leg of Rob Font, the harder punches will be coming from Matsumoto, where if he does hurt Rob Font, I can expect him to jump the guillotine, not even bother trying to get the knockout. But at this point, if Matsumoto hurts him with something hard, a nasty left hook counter, as he's like parrying the jab of Rob Font, they might just stop it. Like he might have horrible optics where it's just like, that's enough. I like Matsumoto in this spot. I understand why people are picking Rob Font, because he looked like he was having a career resurgence. And Firas Zahabi is his absolute like mastermind. It's not the case. It's just the right opponent at the right odds at the right time. Matsumoto, it's not to say that he can't lose this fight. Font hits hard. Font's still got that boxing. And if Matsumoto is not ready for it, he's going to pay. But I would have still picked Dominic Cruz to beat Rob Font. Mixing in the takedowns, the elusivity, Rob Font was not going to win that fight. Give me Matsumoto. Give me second round submission. He maybe has some trouble in the first, makes his reads, starts countering well. The low kicks will add up. He hits him hard. Rob Font stumbles. He jumps on the neck. Nasty ass guillotine. Next bout, we've got Brendan Allen versus Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Now, This is the second time they fought. Hernandez beat Allen for the LFA belt, and after that, they've kind of gone on both trajectories. Allen came into the UFC, I believe, before Hernandez. It doesn't really matter, but Allen was looking good, but he's been knocked out a few times. Chris Curtis, fucking Sean Strickland, embarrassing to say now, and he's had a good run. He went on a great run, beating a ton of dudes that honestly I thought he was going to lose to. And the maturity of Brendan Allen is that he developed a stronger body. He was 22 and when he fought Hernandez when he was 25. But when I look at that fight, if I'm being honest, it was all Hernandez. There was moments where Allen was looking good, but he fatigued. Hernandez, he looked like a fucking world beater in that fight. I expected him, if I would have seen that fight beforehand, I would have expected fantastic things early on from Hernandez, but the body was his issue where he was getting hit to the body a little too much and he would crumble. Only 2 losses ever for Hernandez were due to body shots. Yeah, you can see that Maluko submitted him, but what caused him to get submitted was him getting kicked to the body real fucking hard, and he crumbled and he got subbed. So yeah, that's always been like the kryptonite for Hernandez, and the kryptonite for Allen is sometimes his chin is a little too high and he gets cracked. So when it comes to this fight, the second match, the adjustments made by each man, what's going to be different? Well, for Fluffy, nothing has to change really. All he has to do is you keep going, just move forward. Um, Shit, even in the striking, Allen seemed to have a little bit of success in the first fight, but then Fluffy just said fuck it and started going after him, started hitting him hard. Even hurt Brandon Allen. Fluffy, his striking's not really even being highlighted as much because his biggest attribute is that cardio. Like just even attempting a takedown, you stuffing it, it doesn't matter. Even in his last fight against Pereira, they were like, just make him carry your weight. It doesn't matter. Get him more tired because 5-round fight, you're eventually going to chip away. And that's what Hernandez did. Like this dude has been conditioning his body. He did get hurt by Pereira in the first round pretty badly, but I like the way he showed that toughness at that point. Normally he would just crumble if he gets hit that fucking hard. The maturity of the guy is definitely improved. He specifically said, I've been conditioning my body. And minus 285 odds, it's looking solid. What can Brendan Allen do in this fight? He should not worry about getting taken down. They showed in that first fight that they are pretty equal. Like these are very equal kind of guys. Just a couple of adjustments from either man, and it could go in a different way. Allen, there were moments where he had the mount on Hernandez because I think he does have the better jiu-jitsu, but Hernandez just being so wriggly on the bottom and being so active was able to reverse. With Allen, he needs to know that he can strike. He tends to want to go after the grappling when he shouldn't. Against Nasruddin, he was having a lot of success actually landing on Nasruddin. Maybe he wasn't going to knock him out, but optically he could have won that fight, but he kept trying to pursue the takedown, and that was not working. It was not working. I don't think Allen has good takedowns. I think he can get takedowns, but they're not the cleanest or not the prettiest. And against Hernandez, I don't think it's going to be a good idea. I think it should be a striking matchup for Allen, whose striking has tremendously improved. His kicks have been better. I think he's going to be the harder hitter of the two. I think he's just developed into a much better, stronger guy than Hernandez, who is just more focused on the cardio. It's just Allen does not have the greatest cardio. And if it does become a wrestling match, and if Hernandez can, say, survive any of the clinches where I would suggest Brendan get into and just start blasting knees to the body, if Hernandez can survive that first round, eventually that fatigue's going to come in. Hernandez will start getting takedowns a lot easier on Allen, get some top control. When I tell you that I was super impressed in Hernandez in that first fight, because the way he was just moving on the ground with Allen, it was incredible. It was like this guy is like a step ahead of Allen anywhere and anytime. And Brandon has always kind of been like the I will flop to my back kind of jiu-jitsu guy, which he did in the last fight I wasn't a fan of. Give me Fluffy to win this one again. I don't think much is going to change. I mean, Brandon has a good chance here to win. They are very equally matched, and I think the odds do not reflect that. It's saying that Hernandez is going to win. I think it should be a lot closer, at least minus 180 Hernandez, I believe. to give him the respect. He should be the favorite, but plus 225 on Allen, I think that's a little too ridiculous considering that he just went to a war. Maybe didn't look great against Nasruddin, who just knocked out Israel Adesanya. So give me like a dog or pass situation. I don't think you should be maybe putting Hernandez in every single parlay. I wouldn't blame you if you did, though. Hernandez is probably the higher trajectory fighter. Brendan's always kind of been this guy that, to me, has a ceiling, and I'm already planning to see what the fight between Hernandez and Dricus would look like. So give me Hernandez by a decision. In main event here, we've got Henry Cejudo, Song Yadong, Triple C plus 220. Damn. Kung Fu Kid, Song Yadong minus 270. If you have been paying attention, I did mention that I parlayed two people already. And first one was Abdul Malik, and the other one is one of these guys. And when I earlier mentioned that Henry Cejudo is one of my favorite competitors, it's because he is that. He is an absolute competitor. The dude will find a way to win any way he can. The guy will change his style. This guy, obviously, bantamweight, flyweight champ, Olympic champion. Hold up. I even have his signed glove right here. That's how much of a fan I am of Henry Cejudo. And in his last two fights against now the current champion in Merab and the former champion in Aljo, I picked him in both situations. I'm like, hey, I believe in Triple C. I believe he's still got it in him. You know, at that time, it's like he's fighting two wrestlers where he is the better striker. And in the first fight with Aljo, the first return fight, you know, visually, I didn't think he won the fight. But when you look at the paper and you look at the scorecards, his best round being round number 5, had that one idiot judge given him that round, he would have been champion again. Whether it was justified or not, the fact that they took that round from him, his best round, most definitive round for Henry, it felt a little off. I'm like, this guy can still hang. He almost was champion against Merab, who, you know, striking's pretty god-awful. If he can stuff the takedowns, he can definitely win. And at that point, he hurts Merab. He stumbles him. He actually even gets him down. He's controlling him. It's looking like old Triple C. And then he started slowing down. Merab does what Merab does. And yeah, he's on a 2-fight skid. And for Song Yadong, this kid, he's 21-8. This guy's been fighting good competition. He fought Peter Yan, took a round from Peter Yan. I actually thought he could beat Peter by just doing enough to win those first 2 rounds. The third round was going to be tough because Peter always, figures it out later in the rounds. Unfortunately for me, he figured it out a little too early, and he ended up beating Song Yadong. He took him down, which was like a bad look. But he still competed with a former champion. He fights Chris Gutierrez, where he shows that he can actually wrestle himself. Training with Team Alpha Male, you would expect him to have good takedown defense and also the ability to offensively grapple. Against Ricky Simone, Ricky couldn't do anything. Ricky could not get him down. He ends up knocking out Ricky Simone. What I'm saying is, I've already picked and bet on Song Yadong to beat Henry Cejudo, and it's unfortunate for me to say because it sucks. I love me some Henry Cejudo. I love me some Cringe King, Triple C, the Short King. But at 38 years old, when dudes come back from retirement, it's never a good look. And here's the thing about Cejudo is that he's very good at convincing, specifically me, but he's very good at convincing people that he's still got it, right? He convinced me against Merab. He's like, I'm going to be too quick. And I'm like, yo, he does have that power. I think he's going to be probably the better striker that Merab's ever fought with that ability to, stuff takedowns, but he gassed out. And the more I think about it, is like, this dude's been fighting for a long time. This dude's not only been fighting, but he's been wrestling at the highest level for a long time. And his body just may not have it anymore. With a guy like Triple C, as I mentioned, competitor, with injuries or not, this guy will do his damnedest to try to win a fight. He'll do his damnedest to come out here and try to compete. But there's a time that someone has to tell him, like, yo, that's enough, right? Like, maybe he's looking good in the gym, but when Song Yudong hits him with that first leg kick on that karate stance that he has, how's that body going to react? If he's leaving his head exposed and Song Yudong cracks him with something, is his chin going to get cracked? There's a lot about Triple C at this point that I'm not sure about. He's not even posting any real footage on his Instagram. There's a lot of concerning things. I 100% believe that he still believes he can be champion, but a champion is always going to think that. He's fighting a much younger man with a lot more power who has been way more active. And yes, he's not a championship level fighter quite yet, but he's still time to develop. He's going to have the height advantage, the speed advantage, the youth advantage. And I don't think Triple C is going to be able to hurt him. Now, if Triple C can't get him down to the ground and Song Yudong starts like blasting those low kicks, and if Song gets his own takedowns, because I don't care how good, you don't need an Olympic medal to be able to muscle someone down to the ground, right? Like, it just is what it is sometimes. He's just going to be the bigger, stronger boy. And I do think that Song Yudong is going to find a victory here one way or the other, whether it be via TKO. And the fight that sticks out in my mind is the low kicks that Marlon Moraes was throwing on Henry Cejudo. Those things were chewing him up. And the problem in that fight, and that's what really made me a huge Henry fan, is the grit, the determination to be a champion that day, is that he just bit down a mouthpiece and went after this guy, knowing that Marlon only has like a round and a half of gas. He was able to put it on him and beat the shit out of him. That won't be the case here with Song. If he tries to do that to Song Yudong, who's going to keep distance at the end, throwing low kicks, he's going to get caught with something. And it pains me to say that I think Henry can get knocked out here. Give me Song Yudong. I'm going to say it's going to be a TKO via possible doctor stoppage. Just too much damage in the third round. Like, I like me some Henry too much to say he's going to get knocked out cold, but we'll see how this goes. But I'm treating it like it's Henry's fucking funeral here. Hopefully not. But again, I'm a big fan of Henry Cejudo, and I wish him the best. But at this point, I thought the first two fights back were very favorable for him back in the UFC, like very non-threatening grapplers that aren't really going to be throwing heat at him, or if he stuffs the takedowns, he will be the faster, harder hitter. But here now he's fighting a really hard hitter that, yeah, maybe he can get a takedown or two, but will he be able to keep Song Yudong down, right? Realistically, he's fighting a possible fucking featherweight in Song Yudong, while he was also a flyweight at one point. So the size difference the day of, it's going to be massive. And my biggest fear with Henry, again, is that if he say I do decide, yeah, he's going to out wrestle him, fuck it. Is he going to be able to? Is his body going to be right? Is it going to come in here with 2 ankle sleeves or 2 knee sleeves? Who knows, right? But what I do expect is the younger man not to have those issues. The younger man offensively wrestling, I've already seen him training that. He's been with Alpha Male forever. He has to make sure he does not kind of over expose himself or overthrow or over exert himself as well, where his cardio can potentially fail him in the later rounds and Henry can just balls it out and win the last 3. But within those 3, I do expect Song to be up, Song to be landing very hard shots whenever he can. And it's just going to be hopefully it's not a sad end to the story of Triple C. But again, we shall see what happens. But again, yeah, Johnny TigerBomb MMA, my predictions for UFC Seattle, Cejudo versus Song. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know if you think that Cejudo has something for Song. If you think that, say, because Song Yudong got taken down by the former champion Peter Yan in the way that, like, maybe Peter was a dual threat with the striking and also the wrestling, that it made Song Yudong way more hesitant going into round number 3. If that's your thought, that Henry's going to just be able to take him down at will, let me know what you think. What's your favorite dog of the card? For me, I'm leaning Ricky Simone because he's more than capable of winning against, pillow-fisted Basharat. But there's also the possibility that Julius Walker can make a triumphant UFC debut. But yeah, Johnny TigerBomb MMA. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. See you next week.